Hi, Shmuel.
Hi, good night from Tel Aviv.
Good afternoon. So, everybody is talking about the big surprise of this election being the number of votes that the centrist party, Yesh Atid, got. Did this surprise you?
Well, it is a surprise. No poll predicted so many mandates for Yesh Atid. They got between 10 or 12 mandates in most polls. They got to 20. It's not clear whether the polls were wrong because these are mostly younger voters that the polls could not identify, or was it a last-minute change by many voters who essentially decided between Friday and today that they're going to vote for Yesh Atid. In Israel, the law prevents publishing of new polls in the last 3 days of the campaign, so we can't really know what happened since Friday.
So, the big winner of this election so far seems to be the head of Yesh Atid. His name is Yair Lapid. Tell our viewers and readers, who is Yair Lapid?
Well, Yair Lapid is depends where you want to start. He's a well-known figure in Israel, well-known columnist for Yediot Daily, the largest Israeli newspaper. So he wrote a very popular column at the front of their weekly section. He was a TV anchor, moderating the major news telecast of Friday night, at which many Israelis to which many Israelis turn for the news. And he is also the son of a well-known politician. His father, Tommy Lapid, was the head of a party by the name Shinui, and actually he won 15 mandates about 10 years ago when he ran for election. So now the son uh, was able to get even more mandates than the surprise his father was able to get when he ran for election.
And what do we know about him politically? He's being described as a centrist. What does that mean in the Israeli lingo?
Well, it really means he doesn't have very strong radical views on any of the issues. He's a market economy person. He favors a more capitalist outlook. He didn't quite join the new trend of social economic voters that went mostly for the Labor Party. Um, on the peace process or political issues related to war and peace, he's really a centrist in the sense that he doesn't much believe there is a very strong chance now for peace with the Palestinians. He doesn't much see a partner. He doesn't blame Israel for the failure of the peace process thus far. However, he does want Israel to invest more effort in trying to have negotiations. He doesn't want. I don't want. I don't think he'd want a coalition in which he is a member to have such a harsh rhetoric as the one we saw with the previous coalition that Netanyahu headed.
So you could expect him to be a moderating influence on the Netanyahu government if he's indeed included in the government.
Well, I think there is no Netanyahu cannot truly form a government without Lapid as part of it. In fact, I would argue that the main message that the voters were sending Netanyahu in this election cycle is okay, we understand that you are the only viable candidate to be prime minister. There is no, there is not someone else who can replace you right now, but we do not want your current coalition to remain in place. We would retain you as prime minister as long as you replace your coalition with a more moderate coalition. And a more moderate coalition would mean Lapid to his left, probably Habayit Yehudi, the Jewish home, with Naftali Bennett, another new face in
Yeah.
the Israeli political scene, to his right, and him in the middle. In fact, these three parties can form a coalition all by themselves, a very small coalition according to exit polls, maybe 62 or 63 mandates, they probably want to have more parties joining in. But the fact that Netanyahu can form a coalition with just these two parties um, does give him some leverage in the talks he will have with other parties.
There's 120 mandates up for grabs, so in order to form a coalition, you need 61. And you're saying together, Naftali Bennett and Lapid and Netanyahu would be
And
61?
61 or 62 or 63, it really depends on the final outcome. We are still counting the votes, so we are not yet sure what the final outcome would be. A mandate here and there can still move, but it seems like these three parties will be able to form a coalition.
The press, in at least the Jewish press, the American press, the narrative before the election in Israel was how Israel's veering to the right. Now, the narrative is going to be how Israel went to the center. What do you think about Naftali Bennett's showing?
I think that both Bennett and Lapid are not really about left and right. This whole outlook on Israel as if it was a two-block country with a left wing and a right wing, and it's all about the peace process. This is looking at Israel through very narrow lenses, and this view doesn't really describe what's happening in Israel now. Both with Bennett and with Lapid, what we see is the voters wanting to have new faces in the Israeli political scene. They would like to have younger, still ambitious, but younger politicians, people who are committed to value-driven politics and not to the old agenda of the old parties. I don't think this is really about the settlements or the peace process or even Iran. It is voters saying, okay, we've had enough with the old guys. We are going to retain Netanyahu as prime minister because he's the only one who's capable of doing this job right now. But we are going to surround him by new people. Amazingly, there are going to be, out of the 120 mandates, approximately 50 Knesset members are going to be new faces. Almost half the House, almost half the Parliament is going to be of people who never set foot in the Knesset as legislators. These are new people, new faces. Their agenda is not always clear. It's not always coherent. They don't have the experience, but they do have this promise that fresh people have. They might be better from the old guys, and we would like to try something new.
So the Israelis are saying we want a fresh start, everything but the prime minister. We want everything new except you could stay.
Well, with the prime minister, the problem was that Netanyahu was not really challenged by anyone. There was no real battle for the top job. Not one politician with the stature at which voters could look and say, okay, this guy is capable of being prime minister, was truly challenging Netanyahu. Tzipi Livni was attempting to be that challenger, but it never took off. She got 6 or 7 mandates. Obviously, her new party is relatively a failure. So Netanyahu's position as prime minister was pretty much secured, and I think that's one of the reasons for which Israelis could now turn and vote for their favorite parties, even niche parties, because they saw the prime minister issue as a settled issue, as a done deal. They knew that Netanyahu is going to stay, and then they could move to the other agendas that they have, among them to have fresh new faces in the parliament.
So you've seen the exit polls. What were the 2 or 3 top issues motivating Israelis at the polls?
Well, we didn't yet see answers to such questions. Clearly, the peace process was not at the top of the agenda. Iran was not at the top of the agenda. It was a combination of economic issues, domestic issues. Many people were concerned by the state religion issues, Haredi power, the need to reform this whole issue of Haredis not working enough or not serving in the military. These are the issues that the Israelis were concerned by, and especially so because they, again, they knew that Iran is going to remain in the hands of the prime minister, namely Netanyahu. They knew that Netanyahu is going to be dealing with Iran in the next term as well. So when they looked at other parties, they looked to to other topics as well. And again, Lapid voters are probably more concerned by Haredi power. Bennett voters might be more concerned by the issue of values that Israeli society, that Israeli voters and the Israeli politics is not value driven. That they're too much concerned with the politics and not enough concerned with true values of Zionism and Judaism and all these things that are of great importance, and that Naftali Bennett was able to communicate very well to his voters.
Do you see Netanyahu actually taking away some of the power of the religious parties in this next government? Do you think he'll actually make some strides about the Haredi serving in the army or in national service?
Well, in his speech tonight, he made some delicate reference to the possibility that he might need to change things around. Um, and Lapid is going to make it a big issue. You know, for him to have Yesh Atid and Yair Lapid within the coalition, he will have to make to give them something in return. And this is really what they want. This is the big achievement uh, that they can get with which to go to the voters next time around. Because next time, starting today, really, both the Labour Party and Atnu'a, Tzipi Livni's party, are already attacking Lapid for presumably agreeing to join Netanyahu's coalition, which he didn't yet do, but we all assume that he will. So they're already attacking him for joining Netanyahu's coalition. If he wants to run again and to be able to convince the voters that joining the coalition was the right move, he has to have some achievement. And the achievement he can really have is to do something to start advancing a solution for the problem of Haredi integration and participation in the workforce and the sharing of military burden.
So he's got to see something. He's got to make some progress on that front.
Yeah, there is a plan that the Yesh Atid, they submitted a fairly detailed plan. It was written first by Elazar Stern, who later joined the Tzipi Livni's movement, and then another draft was rewritten by now Knesset member Ofer Shelach, who's a former political defense correspondent for various newspapers. There are many journalists in this coming Knesset, among them Lapid and Yechimovich, and Ofer Shelach is one of them. So they have a detailed plan. They would want Netanyahu to adopt this plan, and I think he's probably going to say, okay, I'm going to take this plan and work with it. It doesn't mean that he's going to execute each and every detail in this plan, but this will be the platform on which they can agree to form a joint coalition.
What does it mean about Israeli society that so many journalists end up popular with the electorate, enough to get elected, enough to take an active role in politics? It would be like Tom Friedman or Anderson Cooper being in politics over here.
Well, first of all, it says something about Israeli journalism. It means that many journalists don't see a future in journalism and are looking to put their mark someplace else. Journalists, famous journalists, have an advantage when they go to run in the primaries. People do recognize their names and their faces. If there are also TV personalities, so and people are using this advantage to run for office.
Well, let me ask you one last question before you run off and run for office. Did the relations, the chilly relations that everybody acknowledges between President Obama, and Netanyahu, do you think that had any impact on this election with the voters?
Well, look, I don't think it had huge impact, but I do think that the tendency of some groups of voters to want a different Netanyahu for the next term. Look, the voters can be divided into three groups. There was the pro-old Netanyahu, the people who wanted the current coalition. And then there were the anti-Bibi voters, and they voted for Meretz and for the Labor, for the parties that they knew would never join a Netanyahu coalition. Then there was this group of pro-new Bibi voters. They agreed to have Netanyahu as the prime minister for the next term, only wanted Netanyahu, a little different Netanyahu. A Netanyahu that is surrounded by a different coalition, and hence also a Netanyahu that has a different tone. And I think these contentious relations with Obama are part of the tone issue. They want a Netanyahu that is more moderate, that is less harsh. They don't want the Lieberman voice to be the dominant voice of the next coalition. They would like it to be something nicer. I don't think most Israeli voters would want Netanyahu to agree to the policies that Obama would want him to take on. But they do want Netanyahu to be smarter or more, less combative about having good relations with the U.S. administration. They understand that being combative and not having good relations has consequences, and they think that a nicer tone can probably be of some value, even if the policies are not agreed upon.
And can Netanyahu be that person, do you think? Is he capable?
I don't think he has much choice. Well, Netanyahu is a very smart man, and he can probably... I think he got the message. The message from voters was pretty clear. He has a problem because in order to move to the left, he would have to make some compromises, and he would have to sacrifice his traditional base. Now, sacrificing the base is a problematic thing to do because he has to think not just about the next term, but also about the one after next. And in the one after next, he might need Haredis again.
Right.
So it's a tricky thing that he has to maneuver around. But I think he'd probably have to do something about it, and he'd have to get the message from voters. Otherwise, he will not be able to form any coalition.
Okay. Thank you, Shmuel. We will keep reading you at jewishjournal.com and Rosner's domain and see how this all plays out in the next few days. Thanks a lot, Shmuel.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.